Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to Roman governance. Today we're going to talk about the three types of government that the Romans went through. We're going to talk about three words today: consul, republic, and empire for your vocab. So today we're going to talk about government. Let's start with the Etruscans. If you go all the way back, how we started with Rome being a small little farm community and the Etruscans being above them, and the Etruscans taking over their wealthy farmland. So this happened around 800 BC, and they taught them, of course, how to have a military. The Etruscans taught them how to build things. They taught them good farm techniques. But the Etruscans had a king. And under these seven kings, in which the Romans had this Etruscan overlord, they basically were not treated very well. One guy up here, his name is Romulus, but I don't think he has anything to do with the myth. So, what was going on? Well, the Etruscan king always treated the Romans differently than he treated his own people. One of the things was he heavily taxed the landowning Romans, which, if you remember, were the patricians. Now, for the next 200 years, they kept taxing these people, and the wealthy patricians did not like it. So they convinced their plebeian workers, this is terrible, right? And the plebeians were like, I guess, I don't know. And so the Roman patrician said, we need to raise up. We know how to fight. They taught us how to fight. They taught us how to farm. They taught us all these things. What do we need them for? Because they didn't want to be taxed anymore, of course. And think about it. Once they rebelled against the Etruscans, look at all that land that was open to be grabbed up by the wealthy patricians. So in the year 509 BC, they can basically got the plebeians to fight with them, and they overthrew the Etruscan king and pushed the Etruscan people out, and now Rome grew larger, and all those patricians grabbed that land. And they said, we have an idea for a new government. We don't want kings. No, we don't want kings. We have a new idea. No more king. How about a republic? How about we have a group of leaders, a republic? And the plebeians went, yeah, that sounds great. Cool. So we'll be in charge. There'll be 300 of us, and we'll be the patrician senate, and we'll make all the decisions, and you guys will be the people we'll make decisions for. And the plebeians went, okay, I guess, all right. Well, now the patricians are in charge, and they're making all the decisions for all of Rome, especially all the plebeians, of course. Now, I don't know about you, that sounds kind of like a double standard. So the Romans take over, the patricians, they take all the land that's now open, they put more plebeians out there working, and then they start a new system of government called a Roman Republic, in which they form a Senate of 300 seats and put themselves in those seats and make decisions for all the plebeians. So you had to be wealthy to be part of the early Roman Republic Senate. Now, in the Senate, they elected two people called consuls, which were senators that would make decisions for a year in the Senate, basically like super senators. Let's say I'm a Roman senator from a wealthy family, and I want to be elected consul next year. I talk to all my Roman senator patrician friends. They vote for me, and next year, me, along with someone else, we are in charge of the Roman Senate, and we make decisions for everybody. And then the next year, we step back down to become a senator, and the next people take over. So this was how the Roman Senate was run for several hundred years. The Roman Republic, of course, making all the decisions for everybody in Rome, raising taxes, lowering taxes, all the plebeians. But what about the plebeians? They had something called an assembly where they'd get together and say, hey, things aren't fair, right? And they're like, yeah. Hey, we want those patrician senators to lower our taxes. Yeah. Hey, we want those patrician senators to give us better living conditions. Yeah. And they'd turn to the Senate and say, are you guys listening? And of course, the patrician Senate would say, what? What are you guys doing? Oh, who cares? We're rich. Look at these guys. They're wearing their red and purple striped togas. Who do they think they are? What a bunch of jerks. They're sending the plebeians off to war because they're the soldiers. They're raising the taxes on the plebeians because they're the workers. They're doing whatever they want with the plebeians, but they don't have to worry because they're the rich and they're in charge. Until something happens. The People's Rebellion. Slaves were coming in, too many slaves taking jobs away from the plebeians because the patricians are hiring them and kicking the plebeians off their land. And of course, the plebeians were citizens. And the plebeians were tired of this. They were tired of all the law changes. They said, come up with 12 laws, write them down so everybody knows what they are, and it goes for everybody. We want a consul seat right here. We want half the Senate seats. We still want our tribunes, and we still want our citizens' assembly. We want all of this. And of course, the patricians said, shut up, we're not giving you anything. And then the plebeians said, there's 90% of us and 10% of you. If you don't give us what we want, we're going to burn down the city and kill all of you. And the patricians went, oh, okay, now we're listening. So you want a consul seat? Done. You want half the Senate seats? Done. You want to keep your tribunes that advise us? Great. You want your people's assembly? Awesome. Are you happy now? The plebeians said yes. But the problem was, once the plebeians started getting into the Senate, they started getting wealthy too. The Senate was like a money maker, and they were getting rich. And a lot of plebeians realized, hey, the people that are supposed to be speaking for us, the plebeian senators, they're corrupt too. They've turned their backs on us. They're not even listening to us. This is just a breakdown of how that looks. Enter Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a rich man from a rich family. He was known for his hundreds of thousands of acres in which he employed many plebeians. He was also a senator, as was everyone in his family, it was male. And he was once a consul for a year with his very good friend Brutus, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And being that general of that military, he was in charge of the 13th Legion, where there were 50,000 men, the largest legion in all of Rome. He was very popular. He listened to his soldiers. His soldiers had his back, he had theirs. And he listened to his men who were complaining about homelessness, complaining about their families not having places to live, complaining about how all the slaves are taking the jobs away from the plebeians, complaining about crime and corruption in the Senate. And finally, Caesar goes, yeah, you're right. Something needs to be done. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to declare war on the Roman government. I'm going to declare war on the Roman Republic. So Julius Caesar amasses his 50,000 men, the 13th Legion. They stand on the northern border of the Rubicon River. He brings all their arms and everything. They come ready for battle, and he tells the men, what we're about to do is treasonous. We are going to take on our own homeland. This has never been done before. We are going to fight for the people who could not speak. We are going to take power back and give it to the people. We are the mighty 13th. I come to you as brother. If you choose to fight with me today, step into this river, and we will change Rome for the better. But if you decide not to, I understand, and you are still my brother, but do not leave this shore. He steps into the water, and according to legend, 50,000 men stepped in with him and cheered. It's on. So Julius Caesar takes the next several years and fights many of the generals and other legions until finally, after 4 or 5 years of fighting, with the people on his side and the biggest legion, the 13th, Julius Caesar defeats all the other armies that the generals and the Senate threw at him. And finally, Caesar walks into the Senate floor and declares himself the only consul, not two, just him, basically making himself a king. Now, remember earlier, the Etruscans had a king, and the Romans didn't like that, especially the wealthy. Well, here we are, another man walking in, declaring himself the only decision maker of the Senate, and the wealthy weren't happy again. Well, the Senate was full of plebeians and wealthy patricians, and his best friend Brutus was a senator, remember? The guy that he was a consul with? And Brutus was plotting Caesar's death because a lot of the people are coming up to him saying, hey, this guy is trying to be a king. We need to get rid of him. We need to bring the republic back. We need the power in the hands of the people, the wealthy people. So Brutus brought a knife, along did many of his friends, one day into the Senate, and he grabs Julius Caesar by the hand before the Senate floor opens. And Caesar was going to listen to what they were going to talk about. And the men stepped forward, and Brutus says, now is the time. And the men plunged knives into Caesar and killed him. As a matter of fact, the last wound went into his back. It was plunged in by Brutus himself. And according to the play by Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, he supposedly on his knees stared up at Brutus and said, et tu, Brute? Et tu? Which means, you too? I can't believe you, brother. He dropped dead. Well, the senators were excited and they ran around screaming, we've done it. We've killed the tyrant. We're brought back the republic. We're going to have the Roman Republic back. We're all going to rule. The one thing they forgot was how much the people loved Julius Caesar. When the plebeians found out what happened, they went sideways. Many people stormed into the Roman Senate, were looking for any senator, not knowing who was responsible, and were tearing people from limb to limb. Matter of fact, a lot of rich people who had nothing to do with anything were being stopped in the streets and attacked by the poor. You've killed Caesar! Well, the Roman senators escaped and got in boats and left. Well, look what just happened. Caesar's dead. The Roman Senate's gone. There's no leadership of Rome. A lot of people saw nobody was in charge of Rome. So whoever had an intact army at the time tried to become the leader of Rome. Right away, Julius Caesar's nephew, Octavian, then 19, saw what was happening and turned to his many advisors and said, listen, I'm Caesar's nephew. I am his heir. If you support me, I can lead Rome and pick up where he left off. And many people backed him. And after several years of war fighting other generals, Octavian becomes the emperor of Rome and changes his name to Augustus Caesar after his uncle, becoming the first pure Roman emperor. He would rule for 45 years and he was fantastic. He did what he was supposed to do. He assembled the Roman Senate back together and listened to them for advisement. He listened to Roman generals for advisement. He listened to the people's assemblies and walked among the people for advisement. He made decisions for the Roman people. For 45 years, he grew the empire bigger than it had ever been. He actually had said at the end of his term, the end of his life, I came to Rome made of brick. I leave Rome today made of marble. And Rome would have an empire, which means single leader, for the next 500 years. Now, this Roman Empire would last for 500 years until Western Rome was destroyed by barbarian soldiers who attacked in 476 AD. Different story, different time. The empire was built from the top down. A good emperor or single leader would listen to his advisors, like Augustus Caesar had done. He would listen to his plebeian and patrician senators, listen to his army advisors, and he would listen to the people's assemblies. But there were a lot of emperors who did not that would come along, and they were bad emperors, and they would weaken the empire and weaken the government and weaken the people's beliefs in them. And eventually, all of that together would lead to the destruction of Rome some 500 years into the empire. This is the breakdown of how it looks. A Roman emperor would sit at the front seat. He would listen to his senate and talk to his people. He would listen to the prefectures, the people who were in charge of the Roman people, the plebeians. He would listen to his military advisors. And all of these things together would help him make great decisions for all of Rome. But if you had an emperor who was corrupt and only wanted things for himself, he listened to nobody and turned his back. But usually those bad emperors found themselves killed by people who wanted his seat. Well, that's it. The Roman Empire grew larger under the Roman rule of the empireship, a lot bigger than the kingship, which was here for the Etruscans, a lot bigger than the Republic with the Punic Wars, and finally this massive area because of the Roman Empire. Thousands of miles of roads were built, art, literature flourished, theaters were built, the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus, bathhouses all over, cities and towns being built all throughout. Roman Empire and the culture was amazing. I'll talk to you guys again soon.